Let me hit the record button. I'm hitting recording. I'm recording for anybody who can't make it tonight. So thanks for joining me, and thanks for being a Just Get Out of Town VIP. I know a lot of people don't quite know what we're all about, and uh, I appreciate you being a part of my goal to help lots of people travel a lot more. Um, Feel free to chime in. Right now, I have all of the mics unmuted, so I intend on this being an interactive webinar, and I want to be interrupted. I want to have people ask questions and have me clarify things that don't make sense and so on. So please feel free to chime in as you see fit. If noise becomes an issue, I will mute you out, and then you can say something in the chat box to let me know if you've got any other questions. So um, thanks, Aaron. Thanks, Mark. Thanks, everyone, for saying hi. Aaron with an E, Aaron with an A as well. Lise, thanks for joining. So let's get started. Tonight's webinar is all about finding trips or using points for trips that are too expensive. So typically anything that isn't on the JGoot site is something you might want to consider using points for, because we specialize in finding cheap trips on the member portal, but sometimes you want to go to a place that's a lot more expensive. So a little bit of background on how I got into point hacking. I've always enjoyed travel. My kids have always enjoyed the beach. I'm a divorced dad. When we don't have the kids, my wife and I enjoy getting out of town. I've introduced my kids to the beach, to the world of scuba, and we try to travel whenever we can. My wife is a teacher. I'm self-employed, but with my wife having school to work around and my kids having school to work around, we pretty much have to work around their school schedules, which means that we travel whenever everyone else is traveling. So sometimes finding cheap trips can be a challenge. So anyway, little background on how we got started in the concept of point hacking was my wife wanted to go to Hawaii, and she's a teacher. Like I said, she travels during peak season, and that was really, really expensive. Way too expensive for me. For the cost of flights alone, we can typically take entire vacations to most other destinations other than Hawaii. So I really struggled with that, and so I started researching point hacking. And so I got my first credit card in April, and it's kind of funny. I actually called the airline company to see about flight availability, to figure out if it was going to even be a possibility. And they said, well, do you want to make a reservation? I said, I don't even have my points yet. They said, oh, that's okay. We'll hold your reservation for up to a year. So I said, okay. We picked some dates, and we reserved our flight, and within maybe 45 days of getting our credit card, we had enough points to fly to Hawaii. And it cost us a total of $22. That was pretty much taxes for the flight, and it was a legitimate free flight. I hear someone saying something. Was that a question for me, or was that a background noise? Okay, just so you know, I've got mics unmuted. You can mute from your end, and then if it becomes a problem, I'll mute them. But please feel free to chime in with any questions you have along the way. So anyway, that was our first flight. We took $22 flights, actually $11 flights times 2, and then we also used points to stay for 5 of our 7 nights free. But that's a little bit different, a little bit more complex, a little bit beyond what I want to get into tonight. Tonight, I want to talk about the basics of just getting started, the foundation of figuring out if this is right for you, and how to pick your goal of what you want to do next. So anyway, after that, about half of our travel is using points, and half of our travel are deals we find that I share with you on the member website. Any questions so far? Let me just check the chat session. Okay, no questions. So before we get into anything else, let's talk about 3 primary reasons you would not want to get into this. So I don't want anyone to take this lightly. Credit cards have gotten a lot of people into trouble. It is an important thing that we go about this the right way. And if anyone signed up just for this and one of these 3 things is a concern for you, by all means, ask for your money back. I do not want anyone who has one of these 3 issues to consider point hacking if it's going to be a problem for you. So the first one is probably the most controversial because credit card hacking, credit card use actually increases your credit score, which should be a good thing for getting a home loan. The higher your credit score, the easier it is to get a loan and the better interest rate you can get. However, if you have too many credit cards, even if they're not used or haven't been used in years, if you have lots of open lines of credit, that can be a problem for underwriters and mortgage bankers. So if you are buying a home in the next 6 months to a year, this is not, well, I'm not going to say it's not for you, but you should definitely check with a mortgage professional before you go and start opening up any new credit cards. So the second thing I want to get out of the way is if you're currently carrying any credit card debt, if you have thousands of dollars in credit card debt already that you're not paying off each month that you make those charges, this is not a wise idea for you because the credit card interest rates are very high, and just carrying a balance for a few months could completely negate the value of the free flights that you're getting. So if you are currently carrying a balance, or if you have a problem paying off credit cards or cash is extremely tight, this also would not be a wise idea to get into. And then finally, you really need to have at least a good credit score. And when I say good, that's a minimum of about 60 or 650, and actually that's not quite good enough to get those 25 and 40,000 and 60 and 100,000 mile offers. Those typically start at 690. But if you're in 650, simply opening a new credit card, maybe it's not a rewards one yet, but opening a new credit card and increasing your line of credit and taking a few basic steps should increase your credit score by enough to make you start being eligible for the really valuable credit card offers that are offering tens of thousands of miles just for signing up and spending $1,000 to $3,000. So with that housekeeping out of the way, let me pause to just see if anyone else has any questions about any of those topics before we move on. Welcome, Moody. Thanks for joining. Sorry, I got something caught in my throat. Give me a second. Okay, moving on. Everyone says it makes sense. Let's get to the fun stuff. So let's also talk about some common objections. I run into this all the time, and I had these objections myself. I actually have traveled in the past using points. I owned a business. It was a marketing business. We spent tens of thousands, if not 6 figures a month on advertising, and it was great. I racked up a point per mile. but that's not how most people operate. So I did get a taste of credit card hacking, and all of these objections. After I sold my marketing company to Remax, and suddenly I wasn't able to accumulate lots and lots of miles, and I really kind of missed it. I considered doing point hacking for years, and a lot of these were objections I had myself when I was kind of procrastinating with the idea of getting into credit cards for the purpose of generating 3 and 5 and 10 points per mile spent or per dollar spent. So the first thing is people don't want to ruin their credit, and that's a perfectly understandable concern. And if that is a serious concern for you, you should do your own research and check that out yourself. But I have put tons and tons of research into this, and I have found that my personal credit score has never, ever been better than since I started doing this. I've always had credit in the high 600s, low 700s, never even really knew why. And I was in real estate. I should have known that, but I didn't. It was just in that safe range. And within a couple months of starting this process, my credit score has never dipped below 790, and it's usually into the low 800s. So without getting into it, there are several factors that go into calculating your credit score, but one of the biggest ones is how much credit do you actually have? So the more credit cards you have, or more importantly, the bigger your line of credit, the better your credit score typically is, as long as you use that credit responsibly and don't run it up and carry a balance and so on. Run it up, carry a balance, and have that balance exceed 10 or 20% of your total credit line, that's where your credit score gets tanked. So that's where we go back to those 3 reasons of why you wouldn't want to do this if you're carrying credit card balances already. But if you use credit as intended, like 80 to 90% of the population does, this should increase your credit score. Another common objection is that you don't want to balance a lot of credit cards. And this was my biggest objection because I hate paying my credit card bill. Even when I was paying one credit card and just dealing with that, it was just another bill to deal with. And that was a big point of resistance for me. However, what I found was when I signed up, I could sign up for multiple cards with the same company. So I have one login and I can manage 6 or 8 different credit cards. So when it comes to pay those bills, you can put them on auto pay. If you're concerned about making sure that you keep a tight eye on finances, which is how I operate, I don't auto pay anything. I want to see the money that's going out and make sure that those cards aren't getting charges that they're not supposed to get. And I have 2 different major credit card companies that I have my credit cards with. I currently have 12 credit cards in my arsenal, and those are with 2 different companies. That's it. So it's 2 different logins. I can log in and pay those bills off, and it's surprisingly easier than I thought. So another very reasonable and very good objection is I don't want to pay the annual fee. If that's a concern, then that you can specifically look for the cards that have 0 introductory APRs, and it's probably about half of them. Half of them have 0 the first year, and then you don't pay that fee until the end of the first year. And if that's a concern, you can cancel the card before that year is up. In fact, I have in my calendar, anytime I open a credit card, I mark in my calendar 11 months down the road that credit card is up for renewal. And I can decide at that time if that credit card is worth keeping around or not. And you can either keep it around, which is good for your credit, because then you still have a large line of credit, which is good for your credit score. But you can choose to close it out, or you can call them and say, can you please downgrade me to the free version of this credit card, which pretty much every credit card out there has. And another very legitimate concern is that you don't want to overspend. I was having a discussion with a friend who's a big Dave Ramsey fan, and Dave Ramsey is very, very, very anti credit card, mostly because he believes, and actually it's not his belief, it's scientific fact, that if you pay cash, it registers as physical pain in your brain, and that helps keep you from spending too much. Whereas a lot of people get into trouble with credit cards because they just run up a big bill, and then at the end of the month, when they thought they might have only spent $500 or $1,000, they spent $2,000, and that can quickly get you into trouble. And if that's a concern, and if you don't have um, good financial discipline and are scared of going and overspending on credit card, then this might not be for you, but that's your own personal choice for you to decide if that's right for you. So I'd really like to pause and make sure there aren't any questions on this, and just check the chat session. No additional chats. Okay, let's get on to the good stuff. So making sure you're ready. The first thing is just you absolutely have to check your credit. I check my credit every time I apply for a new credit card. I have an account with NerdWallet. I also have an account with Credit Karma, but I'm a little geeky about this. One will do just fine. And you should always know your latest credit score before you apply for a card, keeping that minimum of a 690 credit score in mind. If you're below 690, your odds of getting approved go down pretty drastically. So you always, always, always want to check your credit before you apply for any new cards. I recommend NerdWallet if you are pretty sure that you have a solid credit score. So if you've got a credit card that you've been paying on time, if you've got a Macy's card or a Nordstrom card or anything, or a gas card, those are all lines of credit. Those all get reported to Equifax, TransUnion, the big three credit bureaus. And if you've been paying those on time, you can be pretty sure that you have a good enough credit score. And you could just start with NerdWallet. NerdWallet is designed for the people who have better credit scores and gives advice on what credit cards you should get and gives advice on how to improve credit score, but it's designed more towards the upper end. Credit Karma would be a lot more helpful if you have that below 650 range. Check your credit, follow their advice. Sometimes they say, go get an auto loan, which sounded backwards to me, but it makes sense when you think about how credit is calculated. Get an auto loan, make those payments on time. They'll give all of that advice. I won't bore you with those details. That's what they do, and they do a pretty good job of it. I've got close friends that are in that boat, and they've followed those instructions, and they've built their credit score up to where they can start doing this. More important than that is that you don't want to overcommit. So there are two requirements with any new credit card that you get that's going to give you points. They usually have a minimum spend, and it's anywhere from $500 to $4,000. And you have to spend that amount in 90 days. So if spending $4,000 on your credit card sounds like too much in 90 days, well, then you can look a little deeper and find the cards that only require $1,000 or $2,000. And I want to backtrack a little. When I say only $1,000 or $2,000, for my personal needs, that's not a lot. I put everything possible on my credit card. For some people, that might sound like a lot. And this is where a little bit of creative thinking can come into play. There are services that will write your rent or your mortgage checks for you, and you pay 1.5%, 2% on in order to do that. But if you think about that, if you don't spend a lot through other normal channels like grocery, gas, etc., if you really, really need to collect a lot of points, paying a couple percent on a $2,000 bill or mortgage bill is well worth it if that's going to get you 50,000 points that can get you $2,000 flights to Hawaii. So just a little bit of food for thought. But most importantly, don't overcommit. Don't pick a card that's going to require you to go out and spend more aggressively than what you're used to doing. So now let's talk about picking a card. This is probably the biggest reason that people get overwhelmed with this process. And I'd like to simplify it by just saying, just start with Chase. There are a lot of different credit card companies you can choose. They all have great offers. They all have 25 to 100,000 point offers for using their credit card. And without getting too complicated, Chase should always be the first set of credit cards that you do for at least your first 5 credit cards. If you really want, you can go and Google the Chase rule on that. Just Google Chase 524 rule. I'm not going to get any more into that because we could spend an entire session talking about it. And if you're just doing this to get 50 or 100,000 miles so you can fly to Hawaii or fly to Alaska or go wherever you want, it doesn't matter, and it's not important information other than just start with Chase. If you decide down the road that you want to get into this seriously and get geeky like me and have 10 or 12 or 15 cards, then this is extremely important because you will regret not doing that if you don't go that route. So let's just keep it simple without spending a whole session on the Chase 524 rule and say your first 5 credit cards should be with Chase. So with that said, the next step is deciding what you want to do with those points. The last thing you need to do is go and get a credit card and decide that you don't want any more than 1 or 2 credit cards, and then have them be points that you can't use because they don't apply at your home airport, or they don't go to the destinations you wanted to go. So first and foremost, decide on a goal and decide if you want to do domestic travel. It can be as simple as deciding between domestic travel and international travel. If you're going to go the domestic route, if you want to use your points to visit family in the 48 states, Southwest is a great option. They have sometimes they have specials where they're offering 50 or 60,000 points. I actually signed up when they were offering 2 different 60,000 point offers, and within 2 months, not only did I have 120,000 miles to use on Southwest, which by the way can give you 10 to 20,000 points per flight. So not only did I have 120,000 points, but I then became eligible for a companion pass. So just last weekend, we flew to Indiana. I paid $5.60 for myself, and I used points. And then my wife, I didn't have to use points at all. I just signed her up as my companion. So your points, so my 120,000 points are essentially 240,000 points, all for spending $1,000 on one card and $2,000 on the other card and throwing it in a drawer after that. If your goal is either international travel or Alaska, Hawaii, which tend to be a little more expensive, I would recommend either the Chase Sapphire Preferred or the Chase Sapphire Reserve card. Now, those are 2 very similar cards, and your first instinct, my first instinct, was to get this Chase Sapphire Preferred card. It has a $100 per year fee. It's mostly the same as the Reserve. It gets 2 points per dollar spent on dining, a few other details like that. And then the Chase Sapphire Reserve is $450. And most people would think, well, I don't travel often enough, or I don't want to commit to $450. But if you're using this credit card uh, on any travel expenses, the first thing they do is reimburse you $300 for any travel expenses, which includes baggage fees, airline tickets, Uber or Lyft. So anything having to do with transportation, essentially, you get $300 back. So your $450 fee is immediately knocked down to $150. In addition, you get 3 points per dollar spent on dining. So that alone, if you eat out more than a few times a month, could be well worth it because you're going to accrue more points on top of the bonuses that they give you. In addition to the immediate $300 credit, you get a $100 credit towards a global pass or a pre-check pass, which costs $80 to $100. And one of the best perks of the reserve that you don't get with the preferred is that you get lounge access. So anywhere that you travel that has Priority Plus lounges, which is like 1,000 different lounges, if you're at risk of having long layovers, if that airport has a lounge, you get to go hang out and have free drinks and all the perks that those airport lounges have. So my big recommendation is to just stick with that. A lot of people say, well, what about this option? What about Bank of America? What about Citi? What about American Express? All of these other things. Sure, you can debate that. And if you're like me, you can find yourself spending money researching. And the big thing is it really doesn't matter. Between those three cards I just suggested, you can accomplish just about any goal you want. As long as you choose, the right category, whether your goals are domestic or international travel. Any questions with this? All right. Reserved. Can I list the three cards? So sure. And Mark, you asked, do you carry both preferred and reserved? Oh, very good question. So Mark asked a question, do I carry preferred and reserved? I do. However, Chase just recently made a change that you are only allowed one Sapphire card. I happen to have them both, and that was because I made the reserve my fifth Chase card. And that was before that rule was implemented. But so in times past, you could carry both. I don't know. You might be able to slip through the cracks and get a second if you already have a first. But current rules are that you cannot get both. Someone else asked if I could list the cards again. So just go to chase.com and you can scroll to the credit card offers and be sure to select the travel offers. There are hundreds of options, and there are, 12 or 15 options that offer travel bonuses. And the three I recommend, depending on your needs, are one of the Southwest cards. They have several. They have personal cards, they have business cards, they have the Plus is the light users card. It has $1,000 minimum spend and costs $69 a year. And the premium Southwest card is $99 a year after the first year. And the minimum spend on that, I believe, is $2,000. So both of them are pretty reasonable. I think any of the Southwest cards would work for you. And then the others are either of the Chase Sapphire cards. And the reason those are my recommendation is, one, the reserve is everyone's recommendation. You can go to thepointguy.com. There are Facebook travel groups, and they all tend to recommend the reserve. And we already went through those perks. So hopefully that covers that. Let me know if I didn't answer your question, Aaron. All right. Moving on. Now for the fun part of how to use your miles. But more than how to use your miles, this still is kind of the next step you want to take before choosing a card. You want to make sure that the card you're going to choose is going to get you to where you want to go. So if you want to go to Switzerland, this is how you go and verify that your chase card that you're going to get is going to get you there, and they'll actually help you stretch your miles a lot farther. So when I talked about going to Hawaii for 25,000 points each, there was a little bit of help that I needed, and this is the website that I used to do that. So first, you need to determine how many miles you need. So let's say you want to go to Hawaii. If you don't know the tricks, you're going to find 40 to 60,000 miles for a coach seat to Hawaii. And just with that example, I mean, there's 40 to 60,000. If there are two of you, then you might need 100 to 120,000 miles to get the both of you there. You need to know that when you decide what cards you're going to sign up for. But beyond that, you want to pick a plan, and this should not be done yourself. This was another roadblock that I had, and I overwhelmed myself thinking, oh, how am I going to choose the right card? What if that card is with Delta and Delta doesn't fly to where I want to go? Way too much to think about. There are computers for that. And my absolute favorite website that does all of that for you is RewardStock.com. This website is invaluable, and it's free. They get paid by earning commissions when if you look up a flight and they say, oh, you should get the whatever Chase Sapphire card, here's a link, they get paid a commission. So it's a totally free service, and all you have to do is go to the website, say, I want to go from Denver to Hawaii, and they will they make it look like they're working really hard to find it, and it takes 30 or 60 seconds. It's kind of annoying, but they come up with 6 or 8 different options on how you can get to Hawaii, and you can sort by minimum points, easiest to earn, so on and so forth. And they will just tell you, oh, here's how you do it. You go and you get a Chase card, which will transfer to Korean Air. Korean Air is a Delta partner, so transfer your points to Korean, not Delta, and Korean considers the 50 states one region. So they only charge 25,000 points. So that's exactly what my wife and I did. We went to RewardStock. I said, oh, okay, I can get this card. I can apply it to Korean Air. And next thing I knew, we booked through Korean Air on Delta Airlines, and we were on a plane to Hawaii for $11. Yeah. I was really in disbelief, because the one downside to that is Korean does not have a user-friendly website, so I had to call to make my reservation. But just talking to them on the phone, I was able to actually book my ticket before I even had the miles. Reserve my ticket before I had the miles. So, and I attribute all of that to RewardStock. Another website, if you know where you want to go, RewardStock is phenomenal, because they will not only tell you how you can best get airline miles, they also tell you how to stretch your hotel points as far as possible. So not only did my wife and I fly to Hawaii for $11, we stayed at a $400 a night resort for 4 nights, or for 5 nights, and that cost us a total of $75. And RewardStock just spelled it all out for us. They said, go get this card, get the minimum spend, cash in your points. After you do that, go and get this Marriott card. They're currently having a special. They have 100,000 points. So after you get your first card, go do that, and then call Marriott. And that's exactly what I did, and that's exactly how we got to Hawaii. If you don't know where you're going to go, so if you're thinking, oh, well, we might go to Croatia, we might go to Greece, we might go to whatever gets us the best miles, I recommend Reward Ace. It focuses more on flights alone. It doesn't get as granular as RewardStock does, but it's a lot faster. They don't do that little annoying pretending that they're working really hard to find you flights thing. And they just give you the results. So you can say Denver to Rome, Italy, and they'll tell you that it's going to cost you 40,000 points through such and such a carrier, and that will tell you what credit card would work. And the Chase Sapphire cards will work on 80% of the airlines out there. So Reward Ace is another invaluable resource, and I recommend it for when you don't know where you want to go. So if you're thinking, oh, well, we might go somewhere in Europe, but we don't care where, or we'll go wherever we can get for the least points, Reward Ace is a great resource. Wow. So that was all of the bullets that I had for you guys. So I either did a great job and didn't generate any questions, or hopefully we've got more questions that we could talk about now. I see one that's typed in. What about SAP reserved versus Amex? I've got Amex Platinum and I love it. We could talk about these credit cards till we're blue in the face, and I love talking about them. But the big thing that I want to stress is that the more you debate this and think about the different cards that you're going to get, the more you're going to put off making the decision, and it's going to take you 10 times as long to just get started. You could go check your credit score. You could have done it during this call. Check your credit score, go to chase.com, pick a credit card, sign up, and have a credit card in the mail. And depending on how much you spend in groceries and gas and any other expenses, you could have your points within a month. And yes, Amex is a great card. I do think it's a bit more expensive. It has some unique perks that Sapphire Reserve does not. Plus, it's pretty cool to carry around. I get $15 in free Uber rides a month from Amex, and I just throw my card. I have my card on file with Uber, and it just covers the first $15 of every Uber ride I take. So there are all sorts of perks that you could consider. But now I'm going to get into why the Chase thing. If you are considering getting into credit card hacking and you're going to get serious about it, and by serious I mean you're going to eventually have more than 3 or 4 or 5 cards. You don't want to use any credit card other than Chase, because Chase is the one bank that is very picky, and they will not give you a credit card if you have applied for more than 5 credit cards in the last 2 years. So if I went for an Amex card or the SAP reserved, SAP, I don't know that one, but Sapphire reserved. Okay, yeah, I personally like Amex a little bit better for just the perks that you get with that. Sapphire is a very close second. However, if you're going to get into credit card hacking and do this and get and accumulate cards and accumulate points like I am, I mean, I have 500,000 points right now, and I've got 2 cards on the way that are giving me another 130,000 points. And I couldn't have done that. Chase would say, nope, you've applied for too many cards. You don't get one. And once that's gone, and once you're doing this, Chase is gone forever. So you may as well make Chase your first 5 cards. And like I said, we could talk about that subject. It is talked about all the time, and it probably takes up 30% of the credit card hacking forums is just the Chase 524 rule. Keep it simple. If you're new to this, just stick with Chase. You can always go get other cards who are less picky with who they give new cards to down the road. You can't do it the other way around. So if I had to recommend, if you're just getting into this, even though I like the Amex card slightly better, despite it being $100 more a year, I would still recommend going with Chase if you're just getting into this. Okay, so we're at about 45 minutes. I like to keep things under an hour. So if we don't have any other questions, I think this is a great time to wrap things up. Otherwise, I welcome any other questions that you have or thoughts that you have or suggestions for the next topic. This is an ongoing training. I do plan on getting into more sophisticated things like credit card jockeying, the Chase juggling versus Amex versus Citi, and so on. So I do plan on getting into that in future webinars, but if you've got any other basic questions, I'm glad to cover them now. And if not, I think we can wrap this up. Mark asked a question that I'll be glad to answer, but I'm going to go ahead and turn the recording off just for cleanliness. So thanks everyone again for joining. Thanks for if you're listening in on the recording, and we'll see you in future webinars later.